okay. Okay, let's talk about this. Interesting, yeah. We'll talk about that. So we just remember our motivation on this powerful day when everything's given a rocket boosting. Think we're going to listen to these teachings, think about the meaning, understand these things so that we know what we're doing, so when we become a Buddha, so we become sentient beings, so we're all suffering, waiting for us to help them. Okay. Well, it's very interesting, you know. There's two different ways of doing what they call deity yoga, okay? Deity yoga. They call it that. Yoga referring to practice. Deity is this term they use in Tantra to refer to the word Buddha. That's it. For some reason it's used there. There's two types of ways of visualizing the Guru, the Buddha. One is in the form of the Buddha, with Chenrezi's face, according to the painting or the picture you see, blissful, radiant, light being, you know, or female Tara, whatever, in that form. And in your mind, you're thinking the Dharmakaya, the Buddha's mind, is the Guru's mind, they call the absolute Guru. It's indistinguishably the same thing. So you see the deity's form. Then there's another kind of deity yoga, which is very personal, where you visualize. And in some practices, like, you know, in Sridhar Manitara, there's a small Guru Yoga section, has like that. In Vajrasattva practice, same, different ones. Or actual practice, like the Chenrezi practice, the Book of Wisdom, they published, Becoming the Compassionate Buddha, which is this wonderful commentary by His Holiness when he was, a commentary by Lama Yeshe on a practice of Chenrezi in Kriya Tantra, written by His Holiness at the request of his disciples when he was 19. And it's a sort of sadhana he wrote, the inseparability of Chenrezi and the Lama, and it's the kind of practice where you visualize the Lama in his own form. So it's in a very stylized form. You know, in this case, because it's Gelugpa, he's got a yellow pointy hat with his robes on, and in his heart is the deity. And that type of practice is to make you feel closer because it's the Guru himself. Lama Chöpa is that. Lama Chöpa is the Guru in his form. Lama Losang Tupan Dorji Chang. 5 beings. The Lama, your Lama, in the form of Losang, which is Tsongkhapa, looking at his pointy hat and his yellow robes, his robes, and then holding the begging bowl of Lama Losang Tubwan, one of the many synonyms for Shakyamuni Buddha, holding the begging bowl of the Buddha, Dorje Chang, the tantric aspect of Buddha, in his heart. But the form is the Guru. But when we do Chenrezi, like we're doing, it's Chenrezi. But what's interesting, have you ever seen pictures, or you've been to Dharamsala, right? Tushita. Well, that statue in the Vajrasattva compound. That's shocking. That's Lama Zopa, you know, getting us to, because in the years and years of Kopan Monastery, when Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe started there, in 1969 or 70, 71 or something, when their first student, Zina, this one they met in Dharamsala, I mention it whenever I mention it, I don't remember, when they came out of Tibet, refugees, Lama Zopa, they were up in Buxador, and then Lama Zopa was put together with Lama Yeshe, and then he got TB, like a lot of Tibetans, so they went to Darjeeling for the military to recuperate. And it was there in the mid-60s, 66 or something, they met their first Western student, this Eastern European woman who lived in America, called Zina. And then she became their main first student, she became a nun, and she took them to Kathmandu because she was this kind of princess, thought she was a princess. Apparently she was renowned for being so arrogant. She was amazing, this woman, apparently, their first student. And then, because then those days, it was very funny, had this idea of these monks with her teacher, and sort of monks are meant to be humble, so she treated them humbly, so she would give them, they all went to Kathmandu, and Lama Zopa said we really had to practice Dharma, he and Lama at that time, because she would give them the smallest room, the simplest dishes, because she figured that they're monks, where she had the nicest room with the white sort of sheepskin carpet, and what to do, you know, we don't have any examples, so he said we really had to practice Dharma. She treated them like her little toy boys, you know. She'd bring them out and introduce them to all her Western friends who'd come to Kathmandu for the sex and drugs and rock and roll. It was hilarious. Anyway, what am I saying here? Okay, so, what am I saying here? Oh, thank you. Okay, so then they started these courses, the Kathmandu Kopan courses, the November courses as they're called, this intensive Lamrim course that Lama Zopa used to teach. It began the first one in 71, like 12 people came, and then within a year, 200 people were turning up, all these hippies from all over the world. And then in 71, I think Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe's root guru and Lama Zopa's root guru, Trijang Rinpoche, who is the so-called junior tutor to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, is this position of senior tutor, junior tutor. And Trijang Rinpoche, who is a manifestation of Rupa Chakra the Mother Tantra deity, he and Ling Rinpoche both had houses near His Holiness. His Holiness went to Dharamsala, where he had his government in exile. And then all the Tibetans gathered around there, And then up the hill, another hill, near a place called Dharmkot, these lovely old English houses where the English used to go, where the English used to go from Delhi when it was searing hot in the summer, 50 degrees heat, They'd go up to Dharamsala for the summer. And so these two lovely houses, Trijang Rinpoche had one of them and Ling Rinpoche had the other, both close to each other. And then Trijang Rinpoche offered his house to Lama Yeshe, his students. And so there began in 71 Lama's tradition of after you've done the Kopan course intensive, you'd go to Dharamsala, you'd do the Vajrasattva intensive retreat as a preliminary 3 months intensive Vajrasattva retreat. So that tradition continues there in Dharamsala since 71. And then, I don't know, 20 years ago, when was I remember, Lama Zopa got them at Tushita to build an extra little gompa just for the Vajrasattva retreat. So every year in the rainy season, they have a Vajrasattva retreat. So in that gompa, Lama Zopa Rinpoche got them to commission a local artist to do a statue, life-size statue of Vajrasattva with his consort, which is when you've taken initiation into the practice, you then visualising the consort. In this particular case, this practice, we're not doing that one, we're doing single Vajrasattva. He got them to make the statue with the face in the likeness of Lama Yeshe. To make the forces to see it's the guru, the deity, the guru. But it's a bit shocking because there you see Lama Yeshe in his monk form hanging out with his little consort, So it's a bit sort of like outrageous. The Tibetans were quite shocked, I think. It was so sweet of Lama Zopa to help us get the real experience of the guru today. That's not meant to be normally. But you can do that if you want to. You understand? It is, isn't it? Just wonderful. There's the answer to the question. Okay. So, where were we? On this little path of ours, we were up to enthusiastic perseverance, never giving up, which actually, the essence of it is the third one, is confidence, self-confidence. It's very interesting. That's the actual meaning. You know yourself, if there's self-confidence, if you know you can do it, and you see the benefits of doing it, then obviously you will never give up. That's the essence of enthusiasm. Then you won't put it off, and you won't just sit in your, be a couch potato. You'll wake up in the morning, remember your goal, you'll leap out of bed. You won't be lazy. You'll remember your goal, you won't dare to put it off, because every time you put it off, you don't get the result. So you won't have procrastination, you won't have the gross laziness, and you will know you can do it. It's a really interesting way to present the opposite to enthusiasm, or how to cultivate. Because just to say, get some joyful effort, get some enthusiasm, people, there's no method. You can't hear the mechanics of it. We don't see the psychology of it. This really helps us see the psychology of it. Which means, again, it demands constant awareness of your mind, like a hawk, to catch the lies in the mind. It's very skillful, We really, and this is the essence of this is the most difficult and the most crucial of these first 4 of the perfections of the Bodhisattva. Without this, you will not be successful. You can have infinite wisdom coming out your ears. You can have immense compassion. You can have patience. You can have morality. But if you don't have enthusiasm, you will give in to the can't be bothered. You've got to know what the benefits are, and it's very tough in the beginning to know the benefits. Like I said, we know the benefit of $1,000. We don't yet really know the benefit of hearing the teachings. It just doesn't seem the same, You've got to have such clarity and then slowly determination to see the benefit of hearing the teachings, of doing the practice and all these things. We've got to make ourselves, we've got to force ourselves. Believe me, every day I've got to force myself to do my practice. To get to the point where you can't imagine not doing anything, to do anything but your practice, that's really advanced. And that's where we're heading. We've got to be patient to get there and persevere, until eventually the effort is effortless effort. And it's joyful. You can't imagine not doing it. It will be painful not to do it. And it just takes time. I mean, look at us even going to the gym. We can see immediately the benefit of having a healthy body or a handsome body. We just all yearn to look gorgeous. Look at the effort it takes, even though we can see the benefit. Right there in front of us, there's this terrible disconnect between I wish I could, if only I could, I really want to, and then you don't. Can't be bothered, put it off, too much, I can't do it. We can see. So it really does take a very strong mind, constantly checking your mind, resetting your motivation, remembering what you're on the path for, remembering why you're doing it. And it's up to us. No one can do it. No one can convince us. No one can make us do it. We have to do it ourselves. And it's not just some hippy-trippy thing. It's not just emotional. It takes clarity and logic, every single day. Got to be on the case. And this is the main cause of success. Without this, you won't succeed at anything. Forget spiritual practice. And we can see the regret, the deepest, the wrong regret, the regret of not having done things, not having achieved our goals. If only we could. We're constantly tripping our head about this, the sadness in so many people. And this is something I remember recently, I've heard she's published a book about it. It was Australian, I don't remember all the details, I'm sorry, I haven't got my facts straight. A nurse, I think, and I read about it first in The Guardian. I should research it, apparently it's even a book now. She researched among dying people their main regrets. And you know the main one? The main one was not doing what you really wanted to do in your heart, not following your heart. In other words, doing what you thought people expected of you, which is also the one of attaching to reputation, but it's also the one of putting it off, Oh, I shouldn't do this, or I can't really do it, I shouldn't do it. Usually I can't do it means, well, because mummy says this and daddy says that and they expect me to do this and people think this, which is attaching to reputation. That holds us back from really following our heart, really doing. Okay, that could be a samsaric thing, but I'm talking about the general point. Too much fear to follow what I really want to do. And that's what I said to that guy, do you want a statue? He couldn't even hear the question. No, we can't have one, we haven't got the money. Would you like a statue? I told you already, we don't have the money. That's how we truly answer that question to ourselves. We skip right over, do I want it, to go, oh my God, no, I can't do it. It's not possible. This is what keeps us stuck. This is what keeps us stuck. And we think it's virtuous because we're doing what we think we're supposed to do. We're doing what we think God said, Mummy said, Daddy said, the police say, the judge says, my mother, my friends, the next door neighbour, what I'm expected to do, which is attachment to reputation. Fearful. Or thinking it's just not possible. Meaning we haven't got the money, or haven't got the time. We've got our little life set in stone, and then anything outside that, nah, not possible. Look at us. We're scaredy babies. You've got to have great courage to follow what you want to do, because people won't like it. People will criticise you. Guaranteed. Especially if you go outside the box and you leave the partner, you leave the kids. Can you imagine that? The worst crime on earth would be to leave your children. You're seen as a monster. That might be the most beneficial. Now this gets us to this point, which is totally in the Bodhisattva part, actually. This we can talk about for the rest of the eons. All that Lama's ever talked about. And let's get it really clear, technically what it means, which is our motivation. This is something we hear all the time. The Tibetans say, on about your motivation. Yeah, all right, motivation. It seems kind of holy, It's so precise, and we understand it psychologically, technically, what it means actually. Okay, right back to when we talked about karma, Judas rule. We're looking at the fundamental view of the Buddha of what defines a virtuous action, or indeed what defines a non-virtuous action. And this is so important to do because we have an instinct that it's somehow something is self-existently good or self-existently bad, which means it's sort of good in its bones or bad in its bones. Why is it good? Why is it bad? Well, I don't know, it just is, or God said. This is the usual view we have. Mummy said, Daddy said, the world says. We don't analyse what it is that makes an action negative or positive. And this is so crucial, and this is dependent arising. So, like we discussed, the mouse. I have a mouse in my kitchen. Porrick has a mouse in his kitchen. Al has a mouse in his kitchen. Let's say. Okay, start with me. I see a mouse, I go, bloody mouse. And you want to kill it. So there's the intent. If this is an example of an action. and looking at what are the components that make the call, what are the parts of what's called an action of killing. What is an action of killing? What are the components of an action of killing? Well, the crucial one, action meaning the dynamic, psychological, intentional action, karma. The key factor is intention. The key factor is intention. I will kill. Intention. I will kill. Then there has to be the object that you will kill, in this case, the mouse. Then you have to do the action, or get someone else to do it for you, and the closer to the action, the heavier the karma for you. And then you do the action, you kill the mouse, and then the mouse dies before you. This makes it a complete action of killing. But now let's go back to intention and unpack that. This is the crucial piece. Under intention there are various headings that determine the character of that action that you do, determining the karmic results to you of the action. The mouse just dies, straightforward for the mouse. Now, three scenarios. Mine, I'll say, I can't stand mice in my kitchen. How dare there be a mouse in my kitchen? That's aversion. Maybe it's not the most violent anger, but it's aversion. Based on what? My attachment to a mouse-free kitchen, obviously. This is the usual view to a mouse. Unless, of course, it's your pet mouse. And you have attachment to it. But here, aversion, disgusting, yucky, yuck, you know. So this part, which is so built into our intention, all the actions we do in our daily life are spontaneous. Most of the ones we do, they're spontaneous because we've programmed ourselves with eating, sleeping, going to the toilet, killing, lying, stealing. They're all the actions we do that are called negative. Let's say they're negative, not talking about the positive yet. They're all programmed in us, and they're instinctive virtually. And all that means is we practice them often enough that they're second nature. So we don't even notice that there's a motivation. We don't notice there's a motivation. It just means here really, not the word we really use in our life. We tend to think of motivation like you pump yourself up. Doesn't mean that. It just means what we'd say is the reason you're going to do it. The why. Why are you going to kill a mouse, Robina? Well, what do you think? They're dirty, you know. I don't like mice. That's called aversion. They call it, the Tibetans and the Lamas call it motivation. We'd say a reason. What's your reason for doing it? Why are you killing? Good question. That's what they mean by motivation. So that's motivation. They call it motivation. Or we'd say the reason. Or the why. Why are you killing? Why do you have the intention to kill? We ought to ask ourselves that, but we never do. We just assume it's normal to dislike mice. But that part is not part of the intention. It's a way to say it. Strictly speaking, there's intention, I will kill. And you'll see my point now. Let's say Al's mouse. He sees the mouse, and in his case, he sees the little mouse is kind of all mangled. He didn't mean to, but he hurt the mouse. He stomped on it, you know. So he sees the little mouse suffering terribly. And he goes, oh my God, the poor mouse is suffering. I must kill it. That'll stop its suffering. Let's say. Well, if he's a Buddhist, he wouldn't, but let's just say, because that's the normal world. Now, it's exactly the same intention. He says, I will kill the mouse. Oh, why, Al? Because it's suffering. Look at the poor little thing. And it'll stop its suffering. So what's in his heart is completely different from what's in mine. Mine is aversion. How dare this dirty, smelly creature. I want to harm the mouse. That's not intention. Intention says, I will kill. But unpack it. This is a crucial thing to do. Unpack it, and you will see the reason behind my thought, I will kill the mouse. The reason behind his thought, I will kill the mouse. On the surface, it looks the same. He kills a mouse, I kill a mouse. The two mice, they don't care. They're dead. But look at the different, literally, action. His is compelled by compassion. Mine is compelled by wish to harm. Completely opposite. Now, as far as the mice are concerned, and what happens to them, my mouse, maybe it was hearing in the lounge, somebody had, my Buddhist roommate, let's say, my friend had a mantra playing. And as the mouse was as that second before it died, it heard the mantra. Let's say. So that mouse had something, an imprint of virtue, and it triggered its human karma, and right then I stomp on it to kill it with rage. From my side, heavy negative karma, because I want to harm this creature, and I do harm it terribly. I create heavy negative karma because of my motivation, not the intention to kill it, too bare bones. But what causes me to go to do the killing? That's my wish to harm, and indeed I harm it. But for the mouse's side, let's say, it just hears that mantra, that triggers a virtuous imprint, and it gets a human birth. Its mind leaves the body, and it goes into a human birth. Well, actually, I don't get much benefit from that, because I wanted to harm it, and I'm happy when it's dead. Great, the mouse is dead. Heavy negative karma. For the mouse, maybe even it gets a human rebirth. Lucky mouse. Let's say Al, he means so well, he's got full of compassion. He wants to help it. But let's say he's deluded, he thinks killing it will help it. But as we see, the Buddha says, the mouse's mind, according to how it feels when it dies, to what karma ripens, like the rest of us, that'll trigger the karma that will determine its future rebirth. Well, let's say his mouse, already it's freaking out, it's just been harmed, and now this bloke comes on and stomps it to death, thinking he's helping it, wanting to help, full of compassion, no doubt about that. But this poor mouse, he's freaked. He goes straight to the hell realms. Are you seeing the scenarios? So from the mice's side, depending on their karma that ripens, whatever their result is for them, their future life, he actually sent it from the frying pan into the fire, but he meant well. So he created virtuous karma because his compassion. He wanted to help it, even though he didn't have wisdom. Even though he didn't have wisdom. So that's why meaning well is not enough. Because then he ought to ask himself, well, that's interesting. I wonder if I did benefit the mouse. But we never ask that. We just think it's dead now, it's happy. And mainly that's our fear, because we can't bear looking at the suffering, so we just get it out of the way. Kill grandma, kill the mice, kill the lot, It makes us feel better, actually. We can't bear to see the suffering, because attachment's not happy with suffering. So he creates virtue because his compassion compels. And this is a fairly simplistic example. It's just to point out all the different pieces that are at play here. We've got to get it clear. Not just say, oh, it's karma, big fat lump of sort of something. Oh, it's botany. What do you mean by botany? I don't know, things grow. It's not enough to say that. You've got to know the nuts and bolts of karma. You have to, if you say you're a Buddhist. Otherwise it's just being superstitious. Now, Horika's a mouse. He's sitting there cooking lunch for me, his wife, for a change. And he's really feeling kind, and he wants to help me to cook lunch, and then he doesn't even see the mouse, and he goes stomp, and the mouse drops dead. But he didn't even see a mouse. Therefore, there was no intention to kill. Therefore, there can't be a motivation to kill because there's no intention to kill. So you could say, simply speaking, he didn't create any karma at all, because karma equals intention. So three completely different scenarios. 3 dead mice. That's the same. They don't care. They're dead. They're karma right. Each of us completely different. No karma, negative karma, positive karma. This is the power of motivation. And so if we look at the world, when we understand unpacking this intention and the reason behind why people do things, we can see the habit of the intention to kill motivated by either attachment, which is the fishing and the hunting, or motivated by ignorance, if you think killing a bull will get you to heaven, or motivated mostly, let's face it, by aversion, rage, distress, anger, wanting to harm. And we've so trained our minds in these habits that it's completely spontaneous. So that's why we assume that, killing is bad in its nature. We don't unpack it. We don't look at the dependent arising of it. Because killing is also empty of inherent existence, just like everything else. Meaning is dependent arising. So straight away we see these 3 actions. They're completely different scenarios. They look the same. They're all called killing. When we unpack and see the mind behind each intention, they're different actions from our point of view. We've got to be clear about this. And there's other factors under the heading of intention that play a role in the karma we create. Let's say I'm sadistic and I want to see the mouse suffer and I kill it slowly, like the torturers. That is monstrous. Trillion times more heavy for me because of this terrible suffering of the mouse. And my pleasure at its suffering, that's even worse. That's hideous. Another part that plays a massive role in the karma we create, and this is a heavy-duty one, is whether or not, or how deeply habitual it is. And let's face it, we are habitual killers and mozzies. It's just spontaneous. We just go there. Like she, I said, where is she? Where are you? Oh, she's gone. She left. Okay. Like she said, well, this is how we all are. You're chatting away, being kind to your baby, and you kill them like this. Oh, we don't even think we have an intention. Especially we don't think there's a motivation. That indicates habit. And that is the tragedy of the animal's actions. They are primordially programmed. There's an impossibility for them to ever get out of that habit as an animal. A leopard can't change its spots. What a powerful statement. That's what it means. That's the habit one. And this is tragic. Because it's virtually instinctive. So there's utter unawareness of the fact that we're doing it or thinking it. This is habit. This is when it's really entrenched in the mind. This is the killer. Okay, so where are we going there? Motivation. Get into motivation. Okay, so we can... Yes. Yes, Alan. Yes, go. What about it? That's right. That's right. That's right. So then, what are you telling me? What's the point? What are you saying? So what is karma, as you understand it? Yes. What does it mean, actually? It can eventually, when it's virtuous karma ripens. But get back to your question. Unpack your question. What's the actual question? Yes. Right. But your first point was different. You said, what about the lion when it has to survive? So keep on that point. What is your point about survival? Speak that part out. The second part's a different one. This is good. Speak out the survival one. Put that into a question. Turn it into a question, not a statement. And see where we go with it. There's a lion who has a habit to kill. That's right. So then, put that into a question now. What's the question? Yeah. But that's a different question. That's two parts. You had your point was, but what about the poor animals who have to survive? If they don't kill, they will die. Let's discuss that part. Because I know exactly what you mean, but I want to unpack it. It's a very interesting discussion. So, I know you don't, because they're deeply as... I know exactly, darling, this is our point, because we have all these assumptions in our mind we never question. What's underneath, may I suggest, that point is, but the poor lion can't help it. What's she going to do? She has to kill. So therefore, it's not fair that she has bad karma. Isn't that what you're sort of saying? There you go. Good. We've unpacked it. Now, what is that? So what's the point there? Yeah, what's the point of saying that? What's the conclusion from this? You said it. You spoke it. We all think this. So let's drive it further. Come to a conclusion about this. What is this saying? Yes. Yes. That's right. Exactly. Exactly. That's right. All of this. Yep. That's right. That's exactly how we interpret it, isn't it? Okay, so then, conclusion from this, what are you suggesting? What's the action point from this? What's the conclusion from this? What's the learning from this? Okay, good. Okay, good. Good. It's an acceptance. Thank you. So what Buddha's saying, okay, his scenario is this. He's saying this. He says, let's say, in a particular life, I'm a human, and I kill, I lie, I steal, I badmouth, I cheat on my partners. I'm just a regular bad person. Not like Hitler, just a regular bad guy. And I kill the fish, and I kill the mozzies, and I kill the rats, and I've got a real strong tendency to kill. And I never look at my mind, and I never think about impermanence, and then I'm angry and I'm resentful, and then I die. Okay? So what will happen, because I spend a life of immorality, the strong habit of immorality, the strong tendency, because Buddha is saying every microsecond of what every sentient being does leaves an impression in that mind. Like we've been analysing karma. Okay? You with that so far? I know you do. So then I die, and then because of my killing, that the panic and fear ripens at the time of death. That's the karma that ripens. I then go into the bardo, into the intermediate state, and I see the new mummy and mummy daddy lion, and because I've got karma with that type of energy because of my actions, I run to the lion. And then the second point the Buddha says is, when we analyse the suffering of the lion, it's beyond unbearable. The fact that the lion is born in a life with a tendency to kill, the fact that the lion doesn't have a choice, is the exact reason to just cry with such intense compassion for sentient beings. That's the learning from it. Of course she doesn't have a choice. She doesn't have a choice, but that's the tragedy. So what we do in the West is do what you said. Oh, it's just the way it is, we say. But we're not seeing a deeper psychological implication of it. But this is suffering. See, this is what's interesting. If, let's say, you're hungry, you're a human, you're hungry, and your babies are hungry, and think of this, the only option in your mind that you can find is to go outside and stalk your neighbour and get them from behind, grab them by the throat with your teeth and your claws, and rip their guts out while they're screaming in agony, okay? And then you call your babies and you all sit down to eat the hot intestines. Now, that's what Mummy Lion is doing when she gets the buffalo. Wouldn't you agree? Now, okay, now good. We have these two scenarios, and we call this nature. And then we bring the kids in, and we watch this movie of what you're doing for breakfast. And we say, isn't this fascinating? Look at this thing. It's just the way it is. Now, we don't say that, do we, when it comes to humans, do we? Do you see my point? We go, how dare that human kill? She's a monster. She's evil. Send her to hell. Put her in prison. These monsters, look at what they do. Let's say you do that to your own dog. You'd twice go to hell. Even worse than harming humans. You're a monster. You're evil. Now, we've got to look at why it is we have this interesting, complacent view towards a lion. Why do we not think it's just nature? Well, Hitler's just being natural. He's born this way. He doesn't like Jews. He just kills them. That's okay. That's called nature. Why don't we say that? We've got to look at our incredible schizophrenic difference in the way we look at sentient beings, which indicates, I would suggest, the way to say this, is the materialist explanation of animals. Coming from the Christian view, they don't have souls, it's just the way they are. Jesus, I was told as a Catholic that God made those creatures solely for our benefit. They don't have souls, they don't have volition, and our scientific view just perpetuates that. But this is the consequence. But we rage and freak about humans, but if it's all nature for humans too. So then we've got to look at the consequence of this. So then Buddha's suggesting it's all unbearable suffering, because the fact that the lion is born as a lion among creatures who are her breakfast. Now, the koala doesn't have that. It sits there chopping on gum leaves all day. So that shows it's not even common to all animals. It's tendency, karmic tendencies. So all the more reason to have terrible compassion for that lion, because she doesn't have a choice. Because she's got all those imprints. She was Fred, the past life. And Fred did a few good things, and he's got many past lives as well of virtue, human. They're all buried, though. He can't access them now that she's a lion. So this is the explanation for the Buddha, and therefore the action point is, oh my God, I don't want to be born like that. I better stop killing, stop lying, stop harming, because it's unbearable. The suffering is unbearable. Are we communicating? Different view, we don't have to take this view, but this is a different interpretation of the whole scenario. Yes. That's right. He's killing because he's heavy duty and got these crazy views and believes they're all... That's right. So then what's the difference there? So what's wrong with... So you're suggesting, again, killing for your family is okay. So it's okay for you to go stalk the neighbour and rip their guts out for breakfast because it's for your babies, yeah? That's what you're saying. I'm sorry. You see, what we do in the materialist view is desperately find rationale for why we do things. Look at how we are with ego. Every time someone accuses us of something, we try to find a reason why it's okay I did it. But it's not my fault. It's the first thing we think. It's the deep in our bones, this view of guilt and shame, and it's not my fault. This is the dualistic view of ego that's primordial inside us. And this is the kind of view that informs this discussion. Whereas the Buddha's saying, we're all suffering. We're all imprinted with our own tendencies. And look at the ones that are negative, but look at how they cause harm. And out of even ignorance that we think we've got to kill. That itself is the tragedy. The fact that that even arises in our mind. Like, you mentioned this shocking thing that happened in London, These young guys. Now, I'm not being horrible about Nigerians, but something about the heavy mind. You see some of those terrible wars in Africa. And I'm just talking human beings here, who have tendencies. Look at those monstrous wars in Rwanda and places where they rip each other, cut their arms off, they cut their bodies off, they with their knives, you know. I'm not saying it's necessarily Africans, but there's some karma there. So there's this poor tragic person born, he's English, he's a Pom, you know, with his Cockney accent. And the person shooting the whole thing on a video. And I don't know if you saw the video of it? You saw, they say he's covered in blood on his hands, but his body's got no blood on it, so I don't understand that. It can't be right. It's not possible. I don't know what, maybe he painted his hands red. They all say it's covered in blood, but his shirt's completely clean, which doesn't make sense. They hacked his head off, this soldier. Hacked his head, and then they stayed around, all the people around. A woman comes up, talks to him, what are you doing this for? And this woman was amazing. She said, I realised other people were around and he had a gun. I'd rather him shoot me than them. That's phenomenal. She sat there and tried to talk him down, and he wanted to stay to wait for the police. And then he ran towards the police van and they shot him. His poor suffering mind. Would you say that's delusional? This guy convinced these evil people, and so he wants to hack him to death in the middle of the street. Yeah. What? Oh, so what? He's just deluded. That's not virtue. I know, of course they say all that. So you think it's a reason. You're already just... I know that, but what you're doing is defending him. You are. You're saying, oh, the poor guy, he can't help it. He's trying to be... I'm joking a bit. Of course I heard him say that, but everybody who kills has a good reason for it. I know that, so that's true. Delusion. But that's what George Bush says when he dropped bombs on the Iraqis. That's what the Iraqis say when they drop bombs on America. Everybody says that when they kill the enemy. And that's enemy, friend, stranger, isn't it? Which is the view we all have. In other words, we always find a rationale. Oh, I had to kill because, look, he means it sincerely. You can tell he was really sincere in his own way. He really meant his people. He's got compassion for his people, his Muslim people in Afghanistan. So he has compassion. So he thinks doing this will somehow be good. But that's why the baby seal killer bashes the baby seal to death, because his daddy told him you do it this way. That's why the mummy lion goes and rips the guts out of buffalo for her babies. That's why we go and kill fish, because to feed our children. This is the dualistic reason we all do harm, based upon our own crazy stories, based on attachment and karmic imprints, that we carry out these bizarre actions, you know. But all the Buddha is saying is, this is the reason to have compassion for us. We're all mad. No, you became a Muslim 10 years ago. Yeah, it's always the fanatics who do it, isn't it? That's right. But and forget the Muslims. It's just imprints in the mind. Most, people who even want to kill don't want to cut your head off. There's something about cutting your head off. It's kind of intense, isn't it? Hacked his head off in the street and then hung around waiting for the police to come. Wanted to fight it out, But you could see he was sincere. There was some courage there. He didn't run away, It was quite phenomenal. But all I'm getting at is what we've got to, this is the Buddhist approach, to go past the Muslim, go past the black, go past the Nigerian, go past all the shout, horror, shock, wow, monstrous, terrible, shocking, my God, happened, oh my God, my God. Don't look into the mind and just analyse clinically what tendency would be in the mind and where those tendencies come from. The Buddha would say all the tendencies in human minds to kill and harm, they come from being animals. They're the animal actions. We don't like to think that because we think our little Harrys are gorgeous, so cute and nice, and animals are so special. And animals can't help it. We say this. We want to rationalise why the lion. Therefore, we don't think the lion bad. This is how we think about morality. It's dualistic. We have to find a reason why the lion does it. Therefore, she's not bad. Whereas if a human does it to an animal, the only kind of way we stand up for animal rights is when humans harm them. You listen to this. This is some vindictive, heavy-duty thing in our mind. We love to find fault. Not with animals, with humans. Very fascinating. There's torture among animals like you can't even conceive. Every single second. If you look at those animal shows with different eyes, it's so horrific and tragic what they do to each other. But it shows our, in Buddhist view, phenomenal ignorance. We can bring the kids in and call it nature. The cameras go up close and see these monstrous actions these beings do to each other out of ignorance. Yeah. Yep. Okay. This is your second question. It's okay. We have been lions countless times. We have been dogs countless times. So the very fact that we're now human indicates that it's possible. So it's like this, roughly. We've all got trillions of karmic imprints from every microsecond of every thought we do. They're imprints, packed away, seeds, pack. We've done lots of virtuous things. Fred, the one that turned into the lion, he did some good things in that life, there's no question. But because his non-virtue was more instinctive and easier for him to do, and he never tried to grow his virtue, you understand, which is normal human life, which is why it's so hard to practice, that prevailed at the time of death when it's really freaking out and there's no time for any dramas and you're panicking, and this activates the negative karma. So then all the virtue that he created, and indeed virtuous karmas from past lives, are all in his mind, but they're buried. So the lion karma ripens, the lion tendency ripens, the lion scenario ripens, the lion's experiences ripen. So as lion, and she's countless lives of those, more negative. But all the human things she did, all the virtue, they're all there, but buried underneath. She can't access them. But eventually one day, all the track of karma that from the lion birth runs out. Like a miracle, maybe she's born as a little dog. You're a little Buddhist. You say a few mantras in her ear when she dies, and that triggers her virtuous karma. Like my mouse. You with me? It's kind of intricate. But there's trillions of karmic imprints there. But you can't do anything but non-virtue as a lion, because you're driven by primordial ignorance and unbelievable aggression, unbelievable attachment, unbelievable kind of all the other qualities that you can see. Because remember, Buddhist psychology refers to all living beings, not just humans. It's the model that you can use to refer to all living beings. So it's like that. Does that make sense? Are we communicating? It's a very different way of interpreting, isn't it? Yes, of course it is. Yeah, that's right. They're fascinating. They are. Yeah. That's right. No, there's not. Yeah, there is. Okay, let's analyze it. Good, let's analyze it. No, it's a good point. Thank you. Let's look. Okay. So here we are, all of us, sentient beings. Some of us have human shapes. Some of us have gone into human houses at conception. Some go into lion houses at conception. Some go into lizard houses. And so in that little house, you come along with a certain type of tendency, you know. You act like a lizard, you act like a lion. I mean, you don't act like a human in a lion body. We might act like a lion in a human body. But there could be some tendency. You know, you have those pictures of the lion who's feeding the baby mouse, or the dog who loves the cat. What that's all about, cross-species, is there's this strong... Okay, so right back to the beginning scenario. Here we are, mind streams. Mind possessors, as Tibetans would call the sentient beings. Sem Chen, mind possessor. We're going on and on and on, constantly thinking, doing, saying things, or whatever. Leaving imprints, leaving seeds, leaving imprints, leaving seeds, leaving seeds. And these ripen in a major way at the time of death, depending on what the karma ripens, and you run to that new mummies, that new house. Okay. We can all see that most sentient beings, like all the creatures and the humans, we're very social creatures, aren't we? We act interdependently with other creatures, don't we? Other humans, and then, like I said, we have some who are our friends, some who are our enemies, and some who are strangers. Would you agree that's a way of categorizing all beings for each one of us, isn't it? Lions are the same. They have those who have similar karma. A whole bunch of lions all at once died about the same time, ran into lion wombs with similar tendencies, similar aggression, so they all get similar houses with claws and fur and aggression. They're all similar, like us humans. We've got a lot of similarities, right? So we all join together. We do similar things. So the lions, so we among humans, you know, we have babies, so they're called our friends, or the husband is called our friend. So we do have this, we have the karmic connection first. The karmic connection is what brings us together. But then there's the character of the relationship. So if it's virtue, we're going to like each other. And then on top of that, we're going to have attachment to each other, which makes the friend look divine and special. And then, of course, the fierce one of a mother, it's fierce attachment that causes the mother to give her life practically to the baby. And even a lion will do that, and a bird will do that. It's true. It's true. And that's just the habit of attachment, of nurturing, and the habit, the instinct of programming of the relationship to the baby. It's all there from countless lives of having done it, you know, so it just pops up. And there is some protecting of the baby, there's no doubt. But we can see. There was this wonderful story of one of the past lives of the Buddha, the story that Jane mentioned. Do you believe it? She said, no idea, I'm just telling you a story. So there's one of the previous lives of the Buddha when he's a great bodhisattva, which means with immense compassion, sees down below a mummy tiger who's starving, And because she's starving, and this is where it all cuts, and this is with humans as well, where it all breaks down. There's no space for compassion now. She's raging hungry. So yes, she begins to eat her babies. And humans, we will do the same. We'll eat the dog, we'll eat anything. Because the desperate craving is so intense that, in other words, we do have some habit of compassion. With humans, it's more conscious than an animal. There's no doubt. And to your own species, maybe, to your baby, well, not all the species, but to your friends, your baby, your family. Yeah, animals have that. And we all got those tendencies. But attachment doesn't take too much to be thwarted. So, one of those babies comes and upsets the mummy lion. She'll whack, like we do. And when it's really hungry, it'll eat the baby. Without a second thought. So, yes, it shows there's some action of taking care of the babies. There's no doubt about that. But the lion's mind is predominantly attachment and habit. It's habit to do those things. So it's better than nothing. Do you see what I'm saying? And the same with humans, though. And so because with human mind, the only difference between a human mind and an animal mind, all the same tendencies are there, the same potential for Buddhahood is there, but what's ripened as the personality to fit that body and in the conditions in which it lives, they're the differences. So with humans, if we're lucky, we can manifest, we can access our virtuous karma, if we're fortunate, if we work hard. Isn't it? Or we can make choices, and we can see logically how ripping up the guts of buffaloes for breakfast, how going fishing is harmful, and we can make the decision to stop. We can make the decision to practice morality, but we see how hard it is, because instinct of delusion is so strong. Animals can't access that virtue. That's the difference. You see what I'm saying? All the more reason to have compassion. Yep. Join the club. So she. No, not virtue. No. They've got training. No, we all say that. Be careful saying that. We love to say this. Many people now say, oh, I'd rather have an animal any day. It's very horrific to think this. I'll just preface what I'm about to say by this statement. I said it to Sarah. Lama Zopa Rinpoche said at one point, if we could have a direct experience of the mind of your cute little dog that you think is so much more virtuous than a human, which we all think so often, if we could have a direct experience of its mind, the suffering would be so unbearable, we would never want to waste another second of this precious human life. Now that's coming, I'm not asking you to believe it. He's coming from said to be a highly evolved being with great compassion and wisdom. So one would suggest that's coming from his own experience. So that needs looking at. So this suffering that Buddha's talking about is what we can't see in the animals, which is the suffering of ignorance. The suffering of this primordial grasping at the sense of self, which rises into panic and fear and attachment and aggression like you can't even believe. So the difference between the dog and the lion we can see is that one has a more peaceful nature when it's treated nicely. Get it out with the other dogs, and I'm sorry, peaceful dog goes out the window. It will eat its own dog as well. It will eat the cat. It will mangle an animal to death when it's threatened. Look at us when we're threatened. It doesn't take long for compassion to stop, because attachment drives. And we know with the animal. And I'm sorry, your little dog that you think is so virtuous, it's mainly got attachment to being loved. Little wagging his little tail. It will do anything to make you happy. It's like the most codependent creature in the universe. And that's called attachment, I'm sorry. But it's quite pleasant to be around because the one we all think, oh, dogs are adorable and they're completely unconditional love. It's just got masses of attachment. It'll do anything. It's like the ultimate slave. It will do, it's the perfect groomed creature. You understand? It is completely in the palm of your hand. You can do what you like with a devoted dog. That is not virtue, darling. It's totally groveling attachment. It's horrifying. It's monstrous. It's depressing. It's sad. Doesn't mean they're not cute. I'm not saying it denies their nice qualities, but we've got to unpack its mind, This is Buddhist psychology, I'm sorry. And this same logic applies to humans, dogs, animals, spirits, hell beings, you name it. It's the most interesting, different way of seeing human mind. Seeing minds. Yeah.
Going back to
The mouse that Al killed, it went to the lower realms. Yes.
Let's say for the one that sitting on it and it's harmed it and you feel compassion, well, I harmed it, so I can kill it. Now, the best, when wisdom comes into that, the best thing to do is to not kill it, let stuff like that hang around.
That's a question, yeah? Is that a question?
That's my...
Is that a question? It's a big, long... It's a statement and a question. Yes, you are correct. That would be the best thing to do. With your grandma as well. Okay. It's not a question of let it die. It's not your business. You don't let it die. You're not the god of the mouse. You're not in charge of its life and death, which is what the arrogance we have. So even that statement's quite shocking. Let it die, as if you have as if you're God, you know. Excuse me, back off. Its own death. Compassion. Okay, so there's compassion. So as a Buddhist, what he would do would be, as your grandmother's saying, you would make them as peaceful and comfortable as possible. You'd support it. You'd make it less threatened. Put it in a good place. And then, being a good Buddhist, you would say prayers. You'd blow mantras on it to allow it to calm its little mind down. And then, because you're not clairvoyant, is the real reason to do this, not just to let it suffer. Anyway, it's interesting to know that because we realise that every moment of suffering, that feeling of suffering, those painful feelings are karmic seeds, are seeds ripening of past non-virtue. So every one as it ripens is finishing. So we can be glad for little mice and little grandma too, that it's finishing its karma. And then when the time is right, with peaceful mind, you'll help it be more peaceful. Because there it is already, freaking out, but someone's just jumped on it, and now he's going to come and jump on it again. I mean, I never forget one time, I was going to say in Australia, I'm here now. It was before I was a Buddhist, and we were all, a bunch of my friends, we were driving along the coast, you know, what do you call it? Not that one. The Pacific. The one the opposite of the California Pacific Highway. It's our Pacific Highway. On the other side of the ocean is the Pacific Highway in California. So here we have our Pacific Highway, that one between Sydney and Melbourne. We were driving, and then we saw this goanna, great big goanna running across the road, and we saw a truck coming, and he swerved to hit the goanna. Can you imagine? Ran over the goanna. It's a lizard, type of Australian lizard. Large lizard, type of lizard. No, goanna. Or maybe it's an iguana, I don't know. From that. Sounds like it. Anyway, this was so shocking to us, and here we are, these nice, well-meaning people. And oh my God, the poor lizard, the poor goanna. So there it was, like, the body went up, like all this white stuff spurted out. And of course, complete panic shock, and the instinctive thought, of course, was, oh my God, we must kill it, because its suffering was so terrible. But then I tried to think of the poor goanna. It's just been run over by a truck. These maniac girls come along, crying. We are having compassion, but panicking, you know, and haven't thought about it. So we try to get the thing, and we're chucking rocks at its head. Now, can you imagine how the poor goanna's feeling? It's just been run over by a truck. And we mean well, but look how ridiculous. It doesn't think, oh, the girls are trying to help me. So the poor thing wouldn't die. We're just damaging it even more, you know. So we leave it. But it's a bit late by now. The poor goanna, can you imagine? So of course its mind's going to freak out at the time of death. Oh my God, you know. Anyway, okay, keep it, Jane. Just hang on. This was some thought to finish. So, yes, that would be the most skillful and the most kind. But put it like this. You could argue, if you are completely clairvoyant and a high being, you could see the karma of that creature so perfectly. Or your grandma. You with me? You've got the wisdom to see exactly what's going on with their karma. So you'd be able to know exactly when the right time for them to die is to get the maximum benefit from their virtue ripening. Then, of course, you should kill them at that time. It's a perfect action. It's not only compassion, but it's wisdom. But I would suggest you don't think that way, because we don't have that wisdom.
But you can see where it's going.
Yeah, you could, but even the holy beings wouldn't do that. They would allow it to die. You would do prayers, you would do pujas, you would do things to help its mind move through this experience and then die in its own way. You know, go through the Bardo, you do prayers and stuff. There's so much you can do to help dying people and dead people. So much. That would just be the skillful thing. And that's the one when the mind is peaceful. The little mouse is not peaceful right at that point when you're threatening it. You know, help it be peaceful. And then it's not so much pain. When it feels peaceful, until the mind will calm down. When it's peaceful, when it feels not threatened. So then, you know, death will come more naturally. Then it's fine. You see, it's a very reasonable thing. The same with the ant, the moth. All these creatures we meet who are dying. Put it in a safe place, say mantras, blow on it. The least we can do is this for it to help it be. And then be unthreatened where all the other ants don't come and eat it for breakfast, you know, before it's dead, or that poor moth that the creatures come and eat, you know. Same thing. Help it as much as you can.
Put it out into the...
That's fine, yes, as much as you can. We'll leave it for a bit. Probably the mind goes straight away, but leave it for a bit, yeah. And then chuck it out. Fine, the same mantra, and chuck it in. What, Jane? No, let's say, no, I did not say that. That's the interesting point. What I'm saying is, my mouse, which I wanted to brutalize and did brutalize, let's say it was hearing the mantras that you're playing in the next room. And because of the mantra, it leaves a virtuous imprint in its mind. And that, as it's dying with my brutality, it triggers virtue and it goes to a holy land, a pure land. My mouse, even, but that doesn't, I don't get much benefit from that. I wanted to harm it. That's the negative karma. I'm even saying his mouse, which he killed, might have been freaked out and gone to a lower realm, even though he was virtuous. So what I'm trying to say is, what happens to the mouse is one thing, what our karma is another. There's necessarily no direct relationship. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's right. For him, not for the mice. None of this is good for the mice. No. Yeah. Yeah. No. What we're trying to stress. Okay. These three examples, for me, are trying to illustrate mainly, not as if it's a perfect action. It's not. It's trying to illustrate the power of motivation behind the action. That's the one and only point. The conclusion from this isn't therefore mean well when you kill each other. That's not so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you're thinking this. That's not the conclusion here. All it is from a very narrow window, using these three examples to point out the power of motivation. The conclusion isn't therefore it's good to kill with no motivation. The conclusion isn't therefore it's to kill with good motivation. That's not the conclusion. None of those is the conclusion. The conclusion is get some wisdom, please, and back off and stop harming any sentient beings, period. All it's doing is from that narrow window is seeing the benefit, the power of motivation, how that one component, different in our three actions, completely changed the character of our personal actions, our personal karma. That's the one and only point I'm making. Are we clear, people, what I'm saying? Yeah, Jane? But are we clear the point? It's quite specific, you know. Karma's quite intricate and it's quite specific. Yeah? Hang on. Yes? Sure, right, exactly. That's right. Yes. Right. Right. There you go. That's the way to do it. Yes, Jane.
Okay. With my
Belief. You have a belief. Based on some logic or wisdom or just some vague notion in the sky. It's a big statement to say you have a belief.
I know.
Based on what, Jane?
This is why I'm checking it. Okay.
But what do you want to say? But why don't you better say your hypothesis?
Okay.
Belief is too superstitious.
Okay. My hypothesis is
Good.
when people go to the store and they buy clothing that's made in Bangladesh,
Uh-huh.
they know it's made in Bangladesh.
Yes.
They know that many people just buy it in Bangladesh. And they're like, well, I don't give a shit. It's this price.
Right, so what's your point?
My point is that they are as responsible
Uh-huh.
for the deaths of those beings
I see.
as if
Okay.
they were owners
Right.
of the factory.
Okay.
They are
So the person,
supporting that law.
okay, so they're all going to go to the lower realms for the monstrous evil of killing people in Bangladesh. You think that?
Yeah.
Okay. So that means you are responsible. If you pay taxes, you are equally responsible to the pilot for the atomic bomb. When you were living in the 1940s in America and you paid your $2 of taxes, it went to the atomic bomb. You say you should go to the court and be put on death row if they change their rules. I don't think you really think that. So be careful. It's much more subtle and intricate than that. The way they say, because action, it's like saying an action is an action, right? So right here, we showed the difference. Externally the same, a mouse did. But one factor in the mind is different, which is enough to change the entire action for that each person. So it's insane to say the action's equal. It's insane to say that. It's insane to say the action is equal. Look at, well, no, there you go. No, so let's look at that, Jane, more intricately. Okay, shall we do? On the one side, it's true to say, because everything does exist interdependently, because everything does exist in dependence upon this and that, it's not wrong to say there's some, the person who eats, who has the lamb chop on their plate and eats it. It's not wrong to say there is some karmic connection between that person and their action of eating a lamb chop and the killing of that little lamb that was gambling in New Zealand 6 months ago. Okay, now let's analyse what's in the mind of the person eating the lamb chop and what's in the mind of the person killing the lamb. Shall we do that as an exercise? Jane, you brought it up, so now it's my turn to give you some new food for thought so you can come. What's the difference? There's no difference, darling. It's just, Jane. I can use example whatever I like. Once you've got it down for this example, you can extrapolate for all examples, because one example is enough to show all of them. It's the same kind of thing. So, you have a lamb chop on your plate. And even then, there's 50 different scenarios of you eating that lamb chop. Maybe you're a person who's very attached to eating meat. Maybe you're a person who loves lamb. Maybe you're a person who hates eating meat, but your grandma gave you the lamb chop. So even then it's not set in stone. This is the meaning of dependent arising, Jane, that there are a million different factors that make each person's action different necessarily. So there's a lamb chop on your plate. You know it was a lamb gambling in New Zealand. It was the rib of a lamb 6 months ago, let's say. Now we have the person who works in the abattoir, as we call them in Australia and New Zealand, probably the slaughter yard, the slaughterhouse, And that person, he needs a job, looks at the newspaper, and due to his karmic imprint of the habit of killing in the past, he randomly goes, seemingly randomly, sees the job, it kind of shines out at him. Oh, slaughterhouse. Oh, that sounds good. Okay, they pay quite a lot of money, because he sees it's the biggest number of dollars for the hour. And he figures, because it's the only job I can get. But the karma of past killing is what drives him to that job. He goes to the slaughterhouse, they have a job. However they kill lambs, I'm not so sure. How do they kill lambs in slaughterhouses? Let's be graphic here. What do they do? Well, let's say it's... Okay, good. So then he's one of the guys who stuns the lamb. And now there's this person, due to strong karmic imprint of killing, Jane, like the fisherman, because of that habit, under the heading of attention, several things, the habit is one of the worst. He's quite a nice guy. He goes home to he feed his wife. He doesn't beat up his wife or kill her, but some karmic tendency to kill. So because of this, he gets the job in the slaughterhouse. He sees the living lamb. It's like beeping and squealing, not like a fish. Fish die quiet. But he knows it's a living lamb. But because of the karmic imprint of killing, he doesn't notice. He puts his finger in the money he's going to get in his pocket. He kills a lamb, one after another. 1 lamb, 20 lambs a day, 50 lambs a day, day after day after day after day after day. Now, that's quite intense karmic imprints every single day, isn't it? He's got to get the lamb right. He's got to make sure he stuns it properly. Would you agree with this? Would you agree? In the mind, there's a lot more activity going on. Would you agree? And the thoughts are, I must kill this lamb properly, otherwise it won't pay me properly. Would you agree with all that? Okay. Now, you're eating the lamb chop. Are any of those thoughts in your mind? Not even one. Okay. How can they do the same action? Action means karma. It means intention. It means motivation. It means familiarity. It means all these other factors. It doesn't mean there's not some connection. And there's no question that as much as we can on this earth, we do every action we can to prevent it, to stop harming others. But listen to this. Of course it's marvellous that you make sure on every label that you don't buy Bangladeshi clothes, because you don't want to be part of a system where they're badly paid. It's really moral and marvellous to think this. It is. But don't think they're going to stop building crummy factories in Bangladesh because you're so noble. Don't think they're going to stop killing lambs just because you stop eating them. I think the tipping point of the number of people to be vegetarian, for the lambs to actually stop in New Zealand, is a big tipping point. So there's several things here. One, there's no doubt from our side, for our compassion, for our practice, it is marvellous to want to practice morality, to not have horrible things in Bangladesh, to not want to eat lamb chops. There's no question. The first beneficiary is you because you're moved by compassion for those people. This is fantastic. But don't think it's going to stop the Bangladeshis doing their trip because that's their karma. And don't think it's going to stop the lambs who are the previous slaughterers, who are now born as lambs, lining up for the slaughterhouse. Because guess who you think those lambs are? They've got the karma so strong to die. And then the people who are the slaughterers and the slaughterhouses and the money guys who want their money, they're going to probably end up, even if they are vegetarians, they'll end up with a glut of lambs in the factory. Because karma is so strong. So there's more than merely what you just said. This is a bit more food for thought, wouldn't you suggest? So think about that. So you're right and you're wrong. There's more intricate than that. And that's why we must be responsible for every single action we do. And even as one Lama said, and it's true, what Buddha said, it probably lessens your compassion to eat meat, for example. You know, but then we have to follow it through, you know. As somebody said, you should have vegetarian shoes even, you know. The Taiwanese are really into that. They won't touch leather, period. But then the Tibetans have a thing, you know. They say, well, you see, we have compassion for all those creatures, but no one seems to have compassion for the ants, for the creatures who died when you grew the rice. In China, they're very wonderful. In Taiwan, they're also holy, wearing their vegetarian shoes. But they eat the rice where billions of creatures have drowned in that water, and we don't think twice about those creatures. The Pita people don't think twice about creatures, the insects. And so then, because Lord Buddha says, there's not an atom of space you won't find sentient beings, first. Second, just existing, we're harming each other. Just existing. We're breathing them in, we're squashing them under our armpit, they're in our body like a zoo, we're driving on them, walking on them. You understand my point? The suffering, and all Buddha's saying is, this is again the tragedy of samsara. It is literally in the nature of suffering. It's in the nature of suffering. So then what can we do? We could die and let the ants eat our body, that's great, but we've got this human birth, that's where vows and intention to not harm come in. The least we can do to get out of this mire that we're in is to develop an amazing wish to never harm a living being. So when you meet a living being, try not to harm it. Even better, try not to eat the lamb chops as well. But the main one is, you meet a living being, you notice the living being, don't harm it. And that habit in the mind is like a groove you dig that then gets you out of this mess. And then you can help others. You understand? Yeah. That's why we must practice virtue. And then, of course, cultivate compassion everywhere we turn. The baby seal killers, the lion mummy, the humans, everywhere we turn we see suffering. We get courage from this to get out of samsara, renunciation, and then compassion to help others. Do you understand? 10 o'clock. Trying to break before 11 o'clock. We'll keep going. Yes, Craig. Yeah, yes, exactly. Yes, that's right. Yes, I'm supposed to get it to Wisdom by October, and they're publishing early next year, US spring. I want to call it, but I doubt that they will. Their marketing people will freak out. They hate the word death, you see. I want to call it How to Help Your Loved Ones Enjoy Death and Go Happily to the Next Life. That's what I want to call it. I don't think I'll get it. That's going to be, they all have these the marvellous book about death that Jeffrey Hopkins has translated of His Holiness is called The Mind of Clear Light. I mean, give me a break. The book that Wisdom published is called something like Courageous or Fearlessness, Wholesome Fear. I mean, give me a break. Death is the best word. It was very interesting, that book of Sogyal's, the Tibetan book of living and dying. People loved it. It was a bestseller, so really death is not a bad word after all, and it's got to be. But I don't think they're marketing people. They always say, the marketing people run the show on the titles. We know the reason, darling. We don't need John here. We do accept the reason. We all have the same mind. So the book mainly, I'll tell you about it, is just practical advice. And I'm trying to have it done graphically in such a way that it's like bullet points. Because Rinpoche's advice is always so intense, as we know, and there's so many practices, you just get mind-boggled. You can't work out what to do when. So it's going to be each chapter, First of all, there's background, how attachment is the worst suffering of all at the time of death and how to get past it and all. Then how to prepare ourselves, whatever. But the chapters are, several weeks, what to do several weeks before death, what to do close to the time of death, what to do just before the breath stops, what to do after the breath stops, what to do the next 49 days. It's like step by step, exactly. Do this, do this, do this. Get the essence of it, and then the options, the types of practices to do, and the main essential things you need. So it's quite practical. And the key thing, of course, as Rinpoche says, if you're going to help anybody in this life, the best time to help is at the time of death. That's the most dangerous time, because it's then that the karmic seed ripens that will determine all, the next life. So it's the most precious and the most important thing is to have peace. Calm, peaceful, encouraging, virtuous, make it look beautiful. If they're Buddhist, have beautiful images around. If they're Christian, have beautiful images. Only people in that room who will be helping them be peaceful. No, not like rabbiting on, no talking, no gossiping. No people they're really strongly attached to. That seems difficult for us in the West. Strongly have aversion for. Everything that goes on in the room, you should be conducive to the person having a peaceful death, because peaceful states of mind activate virtue, and virtue programs the mind to get a good rebirth. That's right. Yep. Yeah, of course. You can see, you can be, unless, it's a bit like this. If let's say you practice the piano, and someone asks you, come and play it, you'll play it for them quite nicely. But if suddenly you have to give a concert to 1,000 people, you'll get quite nervous. And it's more, and so the strength of your practice is the key, isn't it? You with me? You see? Or if you're suddenly under threat and someone's going to kill you if you don't play the piano. Your heart's beating. It's going to be quite intense to play the piano nicely. So the one thing that will make you play the piano nicely, even under threat, is if you practice it really strongly in daily life. That makes sense, doesn't it? So you could be a person who's practiced virtue, but if you've had a very good life and no one's ever threatened you much and you've had a nice hubby and nice money and nice this and nice that, it's never been that difficult to practice, but you've practiced. Death could be very shocking for you. You might die a terribly suffering death and freak out. That could easily ripen a negative karma to ripen. You could be a person who's had a lot of non-virtue in life but has really struggled to be virtuous, and the time of death can be very blissful, depending on the conditions of the time of death. It's huge. And we have so many karmic imprints. And whichever one is the strongest, the most recent, is the one that will ripen. So it really is like not to be scared of it, but a really crucial time to die with, and so for example, only talking really good things. When you're really anxious and worried, we never think we're very good. Especially at the time of death, all your mind's floating all over the place. Of course you're remembering all the bad things you've done. You've been a bad mother. So the most important thing too is to praise the person. You've been a wonderful person. You've been a good father, a good this. To make them a bit positive, Then that calms the mind. To have good things, not attachment things, but like, mantras, prayers, teachings in the ears to help the person. It's really, the more we understand this, the Buddhist view of how to do it, why to do it, it kind of is practical, makes sense. Yeah. That's right. That's right. True. I agree. Yeah. Do you want a break? 15-minute break? Come back and then we'll have lunch at 11:15, or do you want to keep going? You decide. Huh? Either.
Still on motivation.
Okay. Shall I keep going? Want a break? You want a break? Okay. I'll keep going. You just come back. Go. All right. Okay. So we're on motivation. We came to this for some reason. Oh yes. Okay. All right. What the point here is the incredible power from the bodhisattva motivation. Looking at this first thing about karma, at the emphasis on the role of the reason behind what we do, informing what we do, but that is the main factor. That is the main factor. The main factor. The main factor. So this is an interesting example too. And this is the different interpretations from the Hinayana point of view and the Mahayana point of view. So there's always that story about one of the previous lives of the Buddha when he was a captain on a boat. Some captain, way past. And there were these, with 500 merchants on it. And the story is, there's the Buddha, I think he was the captain. Previous life. So first of all, he doesn't look like a Buddha, he doesn't look like a holy being, he's not walking around with a halo. He's simply, this bodhisattva, bopping through his lives, creating merit. And so already being an Arya bodhisattva, no doubt, he's got realization of emptiness, amazing bodhicitta, clairvoyance, all these other qualities. But looking like a regular guy. He's the captain of a boat. So he sees with his clairvoyance, which is what Buddha would say, we've had countless lives in the past. We've had clairvoyance, countless lives. It's a low-level realization. We've had it countless lives. We've had amazing powers, countless lives. But we haven't gone all the way to realizing emptiness and cutting the root, So this bodhisattva, he sees with his clairvoyance, crystal clear. This kind of clairvoyance is not kind of like, I was an Egyptian princess 14 lives ago. Not sort of like random visions. I see maybe this. It's crystal clear, like you and I can see the door, you can see me, I can see you. They see past and future. That's the power of this mind. So, he sees the mind of one of these merchants, clearly seeing that he's plotting to kill everybody and take everything. And the story is this. His compassion, the captain's compassion for that guy, the perk, not just the 499 other guys, but the perk, because of his intense rage and his intense whatever, his delusion, greed, wish to harm so many people, that would have caused him unbearable suffering in the lower realms. So his compassion for him, remember from the Bodhisattva, everybody's like their precious child, was so overwhelming. He couldn't bear the thought of him suffering. So he thought, rather me than him, I'll kill him instead. So he stops doing it, so he won't do it, and I'll go to the lower realms instead. So they say, okay, now the Hinayana interpretation of teachings that exist in the countries of the Hinayana teachings, they say that negative karma is necessarily negative. Motivation does play a role, but it's still, there's some intrinsic negative there, because they have a view of intrinsic existence to some extent. So they would say there's still some negativity. But the Mahayana would say, Mahayana interpretation, is because the power of that wisdom and the power of that immense compassion was actually would only stop it from being any negative element at all, but actually increased, speeded up his enlightenment. So it was totally virtuous action, like 1 trillion% virtuous action. Are you communicating, people? So all we're getting here is motivation counts. Motivation and wisdom in his case. He really was prepared. He had such wisdom, such clarity, such compassion. Of course, he didn't go to lower realms because he's such a high being. He went. It hastened his Buddhahood. So we've got to think clearly about this. It's quite a technical, it's quite a clear point. And the Mahayana teachings, basing on this, then we see from Lama Zopa's teachings, he spends all day telling us, giving us these little simple techniques of how to transform our ordinary daily samsaric life into virtue. So if owl's killing a mouse, and even it's going to the lower realms, he still creates virtue. I'm not suggesting you should do that, but even the fact that his motivation was compassion transformed his action, and at least he didn't create negative karma. Him, it wasn't wise even. The poor mouse went to the lower realms, for God's sake. But still, his compassion transformed that action that is normally seen as negative. Are we communicating with the point? Now, let's go to ordinary daily life. Look at how we are. What's the status quo? We are nice human beings due to, again, the 4 kinds of karma. Due to very strong morality karma ripening at the time of our past death, Lama Zopa says practice in the context of a very strong life of spiritual practice. Not only that, but practice in the context of keeping vows of morality. That's the karma that ripened, that caused our mind, after it left the body, to go into the intermediate state, and then when it saw our new mummy and daddy, we ran to that egg and sperm, as opposed to the dog's egg and sperm in the backyard, or anywhere else. So, first of all, we got the decent human life. Not only that, look at the conditions of this human life, all of which are from our past actions, our spiritual, our this, our that, our tendencies to be good, kind, to want another spiritual practice. How come we're here today as opposed to anywhere else? You know, how come a drove is here? The tendencies in our mind, like the tendencies in that poor guy's mind, cause him to hack the head of a British soldier off. Soldier, you know. Aren't we fortunate? Even more so, aren't we fortunate that we can appreciate the idea of not killing, not lying, not stealing? Even more, astonishing. Even more that we want a spiritual path. This is like amazing. We've won the lottery a trillion times, but not the lottery, it's hard work. All of this is the virtue we've got. But look still, nevertheless, at the problems in our mind. The delusions, the cause of our suffering, attachment, the fears, the anxiety, the jealousy, the depression, the ego grasping, the hate, just scrape the surface and compassion will stop overnight and we'll get mean to somebody, get upset, get hurt. This is delusions. We're still in samsara. So, given that all the things that we do that we call instinctive, eat, sleep, go to the toilet, have sex, say this, do that, go here, go there, move your body when you want to be comfortable, go to sleep when you're tired, wake up, all the things we do that we just call normal human behavior that are instinctive, that keep this body going, keep the life going. The Buddha says at the subtle level, they're deep, profound delusions and suffering. Every single time we eat mindlessly, we're increasing attachment. Every time we go to sleep mindlessly, we're increasing ignorance. Every time we say mean words about people, we're increasing anger. Okay, we're not like a Hitler, but look. So we have to look at this carefully without being guilty or anything. Uncover our own mind to see the garbage in there that is causing us unbearable pain and increasing our suffering. So, like we're talking, junior school and high school level is back away. Best way is give up sex, drugs and rock and roll, stop harming, stop lying, stop killing, stop having sex, go to the mountains and get some realizations. It's the safest environment to do it in. Amazing. But most of us won't do that. Because the general approach to this first level of practice, as we're talking, is refraining from harming. That's why we have the vows not to harm. That's why we're taking the 24-hour vows today, giving ourselves as much boost as we can in this practice of refraining from harming. But still, we do the usual default things. Eat, sleep, go to the toilet, all the rest. Based on attachment. Therefore negative. Therefore negative, people. Don't just say natural, it's negative. Like a lion. It's natural, but it's negative. It's painful to hear it. So, then we go to the Mahayana. Then we go to start working, helping with others. And then we start looking especially at this teaching about the motivation. And if, our action can be transformed by our motivation, not to mention the Buddha's action in a past life, then this tells us a way to redeem our ordinary actions of daily life. So even, like I'm saying, before we eat our lunch, let us say, think of it differently. So the default mode is attachment and is grasping. We see it as self-existent. We believe it's true. We believe it's set in stone, real self-existent carrots that will make me real self-existent healthy. And then we look at real self-existent chocolate cake that will give me real self-existent pleasure, which is attachment. These are the default modes. So the first level of practice is less than those. You've got to work directly on those. But the Mahayana level is easier and more powerful and unbelievable. So just sitting there for 30 seconds before you shove the food in the mouth mindlessly, in other words, letting attachment run the show, you consciously put in some new thoughts. Remember, every thought is a karma. Therefore, it is a seed you plant that will ripen in the way you think, depending on the motivation. So here we decide, we say the words, okay, we're going to do it for our lunch, coming in, 2 hours, whatever, hour, half an hour. So we think, don't we? First we think it's empty, which is so phenomenal. Just to think it's empty, even if Ivanka says you're not sure what it means, it just puts like an atomic bomb on ego grasping. It loosens your grip of seeing it as real. Then you put the bodhicitta into it. Then you think. We create merit, we create bucket loads of virtuous thoughts. We put in the thought of seeing it as blissful, seeing it as nectar, seeing it as empty. Then we imagine all the beings, then we imagine all the Buddha, which is the most potent object. Then we imagine offering. In that alone, in those thoughts, it's inconceivable virtuous seeds planted in your mind. Then you think, I'm going to eat this so I can continue to be healthy, so I can continue to work on my mind, so I can continue to be a bodhisattva, so I can continue to become a Buddha, so I can benefit sentient beings. Those few thoughts, which are easy to have, they're just English words, you can read the words, that's a thought, easy to have. This puts like trillions of virtuous seeds in your mind. The attachment when you eat is still there, but this virtue you created on top of the eating is so stupendous. As Lama Zopa said jokingly one time, the bigger your stomach, the better. This is the benefit of motivation, of how you think, of changing the way you think. The essence there is bodhicitta. The emptiness is a way of seeing, which transforms it as well. So changing the way we think, adding into it wisdom, adding into it especially bodhicitta, makes it the most stupendous action. Because no action is set in stone as this or that. They're all dependent arising. Are we communicating here? We just have to remember it. It's so easy. It's falling off a log easy. It's cheap and easy to have thoughts. We don't value thoughts, you know. We are convinced, oh, I'm just still a creep, and I'm eating with attachment, and I'm no good, and it is this. What do you mean just have good thoughts? That's just cheating. We're so convinced in the concreteness of things. But this is an easy way to practice. You can be paralyzed from your neck down. I'm not joking. And you can create virtue all day by changing the thoughts. This is what practice is. And then, of course, your body and speech do good things as well, even better. Does this make sense? Is there logic in this? What's your name in the yellow skirt?
Marion.
Marion. Is this logical to you? Or can you think it just sounds weird?
No, it's challenging.
Challenging.
Intellectually challenging, yeah.
You mean there's too many thoughts? I'm saying it too quickly.
No, it's just means
It is.
learning to focus.
There you go. No, that's right.
Exactly what you're saying.
No, I hear you. That's right.
And my mind just wants to go off.
I understand, Marion. I understand. But generally you get the point. No, it is a lot of stuff. It's highly technical. It's like learning maths or something. There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah,
It's true.
when I was in uni,
Yeah.
a whole hour of concentrating was quite hard.
I understand, darling. I get you. I understand exactly what you're saying. Thank you. It's a good point.
I know you won't words though. You're brilliant.
Oh. Okay.
In general.
Oh, well, good. Sorry.
You won't words. It keeps waking me up.
Well, I'm very happy, darling. I'm most pleased. Good. But what I'm learning from this over the years, the more I study it, the more I try to speak it, is the same level of clarity and precision that we know we need for maths and cooking and music is what we need here. Whereas we don't tend to think we do. It's very glossed over generalizations we make. We've got to be intricate. And exactly you make the point, Mary. It's exactly like that. So we can do it. We had a hand up. Yes, Ellen?
Just going back to the example of time.
Yeah.
Thinking about
Yep.
instead of self-action. And when you said the heading, under that was the heading or the things that come of you. And the main one is motivation.
Yeah.
So
So under heading, under intention, you unpack it. There's motivation, big one.
So when you said
Habit,
heading, so I take a look at
then there's the habit, which plays a massive role in the karma you create. Then there is the way you do it. If you get a lot of pleasure from harming the creature and they suffer terribly, the way they suffer. So these are three factors that all inform that action that you do, that play a role in determining the character of your action and therefore the karmic consequences. Do you understand? Which is really what the point we were talking about with Jane. But there's a massive of things, this Jane here, that all are informing. Every person's action is different. There's some relationship, we can't say there's not. But every person's, that's the one. Like even I was saying to you, you could be a person, let's say, who's happy that the lambs were killed and you eat the lamb chop. That's heavy duty. That's almost worse. They say rejoicing in someone else's death is almost as bad as doing the killing. But you could have compassion for the lamb and think of it and then say mantra and blow on it. That makes your action at least less negative because you're being mindful and you're being aware, Let's say your grandma offers it to you, but you're a vegetarian, but you eat it out of kindness to your grandma. That's really virtuous. There's so many scenarios. It can't be, and often when we become vegetarians, we become very fundamentalist, absolute, and then people often who become vegetarians, very curious, they see meat and they're disgusted by it. That's just called anger. That's called aversion. That's not virtuous at all. That's not virtuous at all. You see what I'm saying? It's very fascinating. Oh, there's Fiona. Is it Fiona? I thought it was. Have you been there all the time? I didn't even notice you. My God, that's fascinating, isn't it? Since yesterday. I saw you, but eyes never go there. Fiona, I can't believe. Where are we communicating here? It's a whole hour. I'm so sorry. I could have had your break. You want a break? Hey, you had a break. Never mind. We don't need a break. Okay. So we're on the Bodhisattva path. We've gone through the first 4 of the 6 perfections. We culminated in the fourth one, the most important of those first 4, which, if you perfect those 4, is the perfecting of the compassion wing. That's just a way of saying it. That's all the work you do in relation to sentencing. And I don't know what the criteria are, I'm very sorry, of having perfected. But certainly the criterion of having perfected generosity would be that you would happily give your body. I can't always tell this story. I always tell this story. So if you've heard it 1,000 times, be inspired yet again. Okay? Harry, I mentioned Harry briefly. Remember the story I mentioned about, were you all here when I told the story of Harry tried to help the monk at Coprine and Lama said, don't help him. Okay, so I'll tell it. You weren't here for the last, you didn't hear that. Okay, I'll tell you that story. This is one of wisdom. This is one of exactly a teaching on wisdom and compassion, how you really help a person. Compassion isn't enough. As Lama Zopa says, meaning well isn't enough. This is one example in relation to Harry. And I'll give you another example in relation to Harry of exchanging self for others. The Bodhisattva one, of completing the action of generosity. I'll tell you the story. Okay, so the first story is, Harry is this American friend of ours, who was a monk for years, isn't a monk now, was a meditator. Basically, he's a professional meditator, spends years in the mountains or wherever meditating. And people will always say, oh, wow, Harry's a Bodhisattva, Harry's a Bodhisattva. I wouldn't know. The second story to me indicates that perhaps he is. Certainly it indicates he is. The first one is this interesting story. He, like I mentioned, said a few days ago, he wanted to help this particular monk at Coprine Monastery in Kathmandu, Lama Zopa Lama Yeshe's monastery, who showed like strong sickness and kind of mental illness. And he found a doctor who could help him. And he was very happy to have a doctor to help him. He mentioned it to Lama Yeshe, who's Harry's guru. And Lama just, in his very direct way, said to Harry, just leave it, don't do anything, he's okay. He didn't explain anything, he just did. So Harry, because he had confidence in Lama, didn't get the doctor. The monk got sick, got sicker, went back up to the mountains where his family were, and he died. Now that, on the face of it, sounds like pretty shocking to me. As if Lama doesn't care, and the monk actually dies, didn't get better. But then Lama Lunda, who was the abbot, who's passed away a few years ago, 2 years ago. When did he pass away? Lama Lunda, last year. Okay. Lama Lunda, yeah, he was a student of Lama Yeshe at Sarah J Monastery in Tibet, and Lama, it's a side story here. I'll come back to the main story. Lama Lunda, he was a student of Lama Yeshe at Coprine, at Sarah J in Tibet, and they escaped, came to India. Then Lama Zopa Lama Yeshe went to Kathmandu and started their monastery there up on the hill. Zina found this piece of land up on the hill, outside, 2 stories now, outside Kathmandu, outside Bodhanath, which used to be the home of the king's astrologer. Beautiful piece of land. And so then Zina with her friends somehow found a way to get the land, and then they all moved there. And that's when they started these first courses, in early 1971, where all the Westerners went. That Lama Zopa would teach. So anyway, Lama Lunda was in down south. Remember the story I told you about the Dalai Lama, the dog, and the sadhu? That story? Did I tell that yesterday for you people who knew? Okay. So then they got their land down south, and all the monks, they were so happy to have a place to go, they all went down south and started hacking away at the forest to build these monasteries. It's now fully developed, amazing monasteries all through that part of India. So Lama Lunda was down there with all the Sarah J monks helping do that, and Lama Yeshe writes him a note from Kathmandu and says, please come to Kathmandu. Because, okay, what happened? More story. Lama Zopa was a Sherpa. I mentioned this. And Lama Zopa was a Sherpa. Lama Zopa was the reincarnation of Kunsang Yeshe, this amazing Nyingma Lama in the mountains, up in Sherpa land. In this little, he walked into this hole in the cave, which was used to be where they stored the radishes. And he pulled the radishes out and moved in. Laudo means radish, I think. I heard that. So he was meditating for the last 30 years of his life, this Nyingma yogi, Kunsang Yeshe. Then he died, and then Zopa got born, and he was recognized as the reincarnation of this Kunsang Yeshe. He became known as the Laudo Lama. So then eventually he escaped from Tibet. He was in Tibet briefly, and went from Tibet, went to India, met Lama Yeshe, he became his teacher. Then they're after Darjeeling, they meet their first Western student, they come down to Kathmandu, they're in the Kathmandu Valley, they're in Bodhanath, where this wonderful big stupa is. It's just attracted all the Tibetans. They all start to live there, in the Kathmandu Valley. And then, as Lama Zopa said, they look out of their monastery window at this hill. And Lama Zopa said, Lama, always look at this hill. It was the Kopan Hill. A little village there called Kopan. And it was the king's astrologer. So that's where they started their courses. So where was I now? I'm trying not to lose the link here. Okay, so Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa start Kopan Monastery. And Lama Yeshe writes Lama Lunduk, who was his student in Tibet, who's a couple of years younger than him, to please come and help me look after the monks. Because Lama Zopa's when Lama Zopa in the previous life, Lado Lama, he was requested by all the local people to please start a monastery for the local boys. And he said, I'm too old, but I promise I'll do it in my next life. So when Lama Zopa went back there to regain his cave and his possessions, he then fulfilled his promise and started a school called Lama Yeshe called it the Mount Everest Center. So about 30 young monks from all the local area, 4 of them tulkus, all came and started learning. And then in the winter they come down to Kopan Monastery. But after a couple of years they stayed at Kopan Monastery. So this dual facility is what developed. They started having courses for Westerners, and they'd live there, and they'd have this monastery at the same time. And that's what it is now. It's like this village now, 300, 400 monks. Amazing place, gorgeous place, just like a little town, 300, 400 monks, and down the road, a nunnery, maybe more nuns and monks now, doing the same program, all based on Lama Yeshe making it happen for the nuns, It's amazing what he's done. And so, anyway, they were beginning this, and Lama Zopa, Lama Yeshe wrote to Lama Lunduk, who's down there in south of India, in the early 70s, trying to help the monasteries grow, and he writes a little note to Lama Lunduk and says, please come help me with the monks, the monastery. And so he asked the abbot, Lama Lunduk asked his abbot at Serajay, and the abbot said, yeah, go for a couple of months and help him, but then come back. Well, that was in 1972, and he stayed. And then he became the abbot. He was there for 40 years, and he died last year, 40 years. Yeah, 40 years, he was the abbot. And all the monks adored him, didn't they? Absolutely adored Lama Lunduk. Sweet nature, beautiful human being. And he passed away, and they're building a big stupa for him. They're building a big stupa for him now, Al. Great big stupa next to Lama Control stupa. Anyway, that's Lama Lunduk. So Lama Lunduk is the abbot at Kopan. Harry's there. Harry wants to help the monk. Lama says, leave it. The monk dies. Lama Lunduk says to Harry, what happened is Lama Yeshe, because of his clairvoyance, can see clearly the karma that this monk created in past lives, heavy negative karma, is the cause of this suffering. And if he gets better now, he'll be fine with a nice long life, but he won't have finished that heavy karma. So better, Lama could see with his clairvoyance and his compassion and his wisdom, that it was better for the monk to have the suffering and to die young. So in that case, you could say, John, he let him. He made a decision. He did pull the shot because he had the power and the wisdom and the compassion to know exactly how to help this monk. The only reason he let him couldn't, said no, don't help him, was actually better to help him do that. Because as Lama Yeshe said, if he'd gotten better in this life, he would have been fine. But he wouldn't have finished the karma. The next life would have been like a nightmare, much worse. Now that's long-term wisdom. Yeah, that's long-term wisdom. Who has that wisdom? We don't have that wisdom, That's pretty profound. You've got to have that wisdom and the compassion. And that takes courage to make a decision like that. And if you just do it in a random way, or let them suffer, it's good for them, that's heavy. And you can see in our medical world, we've got so many amazing people who want to help people. But because we have this attachment to make things nice, and attachment can't bear horrible things. So of course we can't bear death, we can't bear sickness, so the default mode is keep them alive at all costs. So we've created these terrible dilemmas for ourselves, haven't we? People living like Becky for 40 years being pumped alive, Because we've got this horror, we think death is a mistake. And it's wonderful to see how that's changing now in the West. I went to a wonderful conference in Ballarat 2 years ago, and it was doctors and nurses who've chosen the palliative care, chosen that type of medicine. And I swear to you, ordinary people, I was so moved by their compassion, wanting to help with people who are, dying. So it's accepting death as natural now. It's pretty amazing. I went to a wonderful conference too, Westmead Hospital, which is a children's hospital, the children's section out of Sydney, earlier this year. It was incredible. I was so moved by it. This doctor, such an amazing doctor, palliative care for children, babies and children. And so one of the things they do, they really give wonderful service to the parents, really treating death as natural, having it all kind of bright and open and clear, no shame, no guilt, helping the family stay around. Even they have the morgue next door in this unit. The morgue is like a beautifully decorated room with children's things, and the kids but the sisters and brothers are allowed to go in there, and then even one little 6-year-old saying, "Come and meet my dead brother." This wonderful demystification of death, instead of this horror of freaking out, the shock and horror we have. This doctor, the one who's behind me, is so moved. I was so moved by that. His approach to help people face death more easily, with a loving mind, help the person die, help the parents. Like with some of the horror stories of the parents, the way the hospital, because of ordinary nurses and doctors' fears, the way it was just shocking. There's such good people doing things now. So amazing. Anyway, where were we? Motivation. Oh, and Harry. Thank you very much. So the other story about Harry, which is an illustration of a person who has got bodhicitta, who has exchanged for others, who has exchanged their self for others, who has exchanged their self for others. And this story, I've heard about it, and then I saw Harry many years ago, and I asked him to confirm it. So this is straight from the horse's mouth. Okay, this is what happened. Harry has spent many years meditating, like I said, and up where Lama's brother comes from, up in the Sherpa country, where all the people say who do meditate there, there's something about the higher you go in the mountains, the more rarefied anyway the atmosphere is, but because the holy beings have been meditating there for centuries, the more profound it is. Like I mentioned, remember, a few days ago, when I interviewed our wonderful monk, Swiss monk called Rene, who's a professional meditator for the last 35 years, and I interviewed him in the first issue of Mandala magazine that I edited back in 1995 about his retreat in Urseling. More stories are coming. Oh dear, I can feel them. Okay, Ursel means place of clear light. His Holiness the Dalai Lama named this wonderful retreat centre in Spain, just out of Granada, up in the mountains. He came there in 82. Lama Yeshe invited His Holiness to Italy, France, and Spain, some of the centres. Other people invited as well. And the side story there is that Lama Yeshe invited 10 of us, 5 girls and 5 boys, to be security guards for His Holiness. It was very shocking to the Tibetans to see these girls being security guards. It was amazing. But Lama was just so wonderful, so radical. So four of the 5 of us were nuns. So Lama made us wear lay clothes. We all had a uniform, for God's sake. Had to wear a little uniform, a skirt and jackets and everything, and I had hair by then. I was a nun still, working for Wisdom in London. And so I couldn't believe it was like winning the lottery, being a security guard for the Dalai Lama. I couldn't believe it. I mean, what a joke. We didn't have no qualifications. But it was so kind of him. We had 10 of us. We'd travel with him for like 2 months on the plane. We'd guard his hotel rooms. We'd be at the teachings, looking serious, looking around, guarding the Dalai Lama. It was amazing, I tell you. And so I remember one time Lama, he saw I wore these clothes, and I thought I better look like a proper lady, So I had hair, short hair. And then I was in Milan, and my friend Susanna, she took me in, and I bought these beautiful maroon knee-length boots, really handsome Italian leather boots, not vegetarian, with little skirts and little jackets and everything. And I thought, okay, I've got to look like a proper lady, so I wore lippy. I thought, ladies wear lippy, I've got to look like a nice lady, even though I was a nun. And I remember 2 things. First of all, Lama Geshe Rabten. I don't know if you ever met Geshe Rabten. You heard about him, Geshe Rabten? One of Lama's gurus, one of my lamas. He saw me. Oh, there you go. He was very stern. He was outrageous. And he saw me. He said, "Are you still a nun?" I said, "Yes, yes, no." He was so pleased. But Lama Yeshe used to look at me and laugh and say, "I think I like you better like that." He did. I couldn't believe. Anyway, we had these 2 blissful months travelling around with His Holiness, being security guard. And Urseling was one of the places, and this wonderful retreat place up in the mountains. And His Holiness said it reminded him of Tibet. It really is like these stone cottages. It's like medieval. It's wonderful. Very pure, very blessed. And he named it Urseling, place of clear light. So where were we now? Back to Harry. Thank you. We're coming there. Okay. Harry, Urseling, place of clear light. Okay, thank you. Interviewed Renee. Okay. So Renee, I'm getting to Harry. Renee, he spent a long time up there, one of his many, many retreats, like an 18-month retreat. I'm coming to Harry. This is giving context. Doing single point of concentration. And hang on. No, but I'm wondering why I'm telling it. I know, but why am I telling it?
You were telling that it wasn't as sacred as being in...
Oh, the high mountains. Thank you, the high mountains. Okay. Okay. Oh, no, I'm getting out of it. It's too many stories. I need an editor in my head. Okay, so he's up in there and he's meditating for like 18 months. But he said he got to maybe the 5th of the 9 stages of single point of concentration. And then I was interviewing him for the 95 issue of Mandala, and I was interviewing him at Copan, is another side bit, and he said, even though Copan is more busy, like I said, the dogs are down there and the Hindus all there shouting prayers in the morning, they shout as loud as possible. There's so much noise and chat in the valley, you know. But he said his mind got more subtle there with all the people and sounds than up in the mountains in Spain. Because one of the key things they say is a main factor for a place being the best to meditate is where it's been blessed by the presence of other holy beings. So Harry, this meditator, now we're getting to the story about Harry. So the higher you go in the mountains, the more pure and blessed by the presence of all the great past yogis for the last 1500 years, you know, whatever. So Harry spent years and years up in the mountains meditating. So one year, he's in Copan Monastery, which is in Kathmandu Valley, and he decides he's going up to meditate again. He takes his, you know, he has a big pack, and you get a flight maybe halfway, then you walk for days and days and days to get right up high to these caves where he's been meditating in the past. And these walks are treacherous, you know. So anyway, the point is, at Copan, Lama Zopa said he had a dream that Harry would die. Well, my parenthetical comment here is Lama Zopa doesn't sleep. So obviously it was his clairvoyance. He was just being humble, saying he had a dream, you know. It was his clairvoyance, seeing that Harry was a danger to Harry's life. And he asked it, and they couldn't get a message to him. He'd already gone, pre, you know, cell phones. So he asked Geshe Lama Kontrog, that other amazing yogi who lived naked, no food, no sleep, flying in the sky, all those ones, that one, clairvoyant, the spirits, all that one. He asked him to do, he was at Copan, he asked him to do prayers for Harry. So Lama Geshe Lama Kontrog is at Copan, another story, because in 1974, when Geshe Lama Kontrog was up in the mountains, naked, remember, 7 years naked, he came, at some point he was starting to help all the villagers, and he came down to buy things in Boda and do special things. And there's Lama Yeshe, who's been there for 2 years at Copan. He sees his old friend, runs up and hugs him, you know, and begs him to come and help him at the monastery. And Geshe Lama Kontrog, no, he's still busy, so he goes back up and does more meditating. And then when Lama Yeshe passed away at Copan, suddenly Geshe Lama Kontrog turned up. No one knew really why, you know. He just popped up, and he stayed for the last 20 years of his life. He passed away in 2001. And Lama Zopa said, when Lama Yeshe passed away, all the smiles of Copan went away. When Geshe Lama Kontrog came, all the smiles came back. So there's Geshe Lama Kontrog at Sarah, at Copan. Must have been visiting. Oh, hang on, where are we? Oh, yeah, no, okay, Lama's passed away. Geshe Lama Kontrog's there. Lama Zopa's there now. And then Lama Zopa asked Geshe Lama Kontrog to pray for Harry. And Geshe Lama Kontrog's totally clairvoyant, Bodhisattva, got realization of emptiness, lives in Vajrasattva Pure Land, so he's a totally qualified dude, you know. So now the story is, there's Harry, up the mountain. This is what I asked Harry about. There was someone with him from behind, a nun. She must have told the story. So Harry's going up with his big pack. And these mountains are treacherous. I've never been up there. And you easily fall over. The Sherpas are regularly falling over, these porters, you know. And these porters, they have these gigantic packs like this, stuck to their forehead. And one of my friends who did it, he said, Robina, for 10 days all I saw was my feet. And they walk like this, you know. Just talk about treacherous. On this hideous mountain where you drop over any second 1,000 feet below. So anyway, the point is, Harry's walking up these really tough mountain paths. And he sees 4 Sherpas walking down with their big packs. And he stops and he says to himself, oh, okay, 4 of them, 1 of me. All right, I'll step to the side. So remember all the talk we did about, I didn't go into it much, in exchanging self for others, all these tricky things you've got to do to trick ego into seeing that you're less valuable, others are more important. So one of the ridiculous logics you use to prove to ego how stupid it is I'm 1, there's 4, 4 is more than 1, okay, they're more important. It's not a very difficult sum to do, it's a simple equation. But who thinks that, what a joke. So Harry, obviously, even that thought, for me, proves he has to have had, this exchanging self for others. Virtually body teacher, has to have. You wouldn't do that naturally. What we call natural is you'd have panic, instinct for survival, you get up against the cliff, and you'd hope they don't all fall off. And if they do, it's not my fault. Isn't that how we'd be? Normal, heart beating fast, oh my God, please. Well, they must be really close. So to sit there calmly, and not being some drama queen, hey, I'm going to save your life, I'm going to stand on the edge, come on. No, just did it. Lets them pass. And then he said, if they knock me, I won't hold on. Now that's even more insane, right? He's prepared to fall to his death so as not to have 4 other people harmed. This has to be bodhicitta. It has to be that he's done all these practices. And the thing about all this stuff about compassion, we tend to think of these things as kind of like random events. Then you go back to be a regular person you mean to your wife, But this is a person who's accomplished this, like they've perfected it. Like a person who can play piano every time. It's not just random. They've practiced for years and years and years, ripping out the ego, probably realised emptiness, this phenomenal exchanging self for others. It has to be practiced to perfection. That's the meaning of that word. So, boom, he's standing on the edge, he's got his big pack on his back, and they knock him. By accident, they knock him. And they're totally intent on doing what they have to do, So then he's falling, he said. He had a psychic vision of the entire fall, is what he said. I saw my body crash to the ground. His bag's pulling him, right? He's not holding on to them. And his mind is not fearful. He's made a decision, with compassion for these people. Then he said, halfway through his fall, his feet are still on the ground, he feels the hands of Geshe-Lama Kongtrul very strongly on his pack, on his body, pushing him in the reverse direction, and fell into the Sherpas. I like that story. Isn't that a nice story? Gives you confidence, doesn't it? So I think, look, first 2 responses, his thoughts, that's the proof that he practiced this stuff. Just like if you sit there and play the piano perfectly, it's the proof you practiced. It didn't come from the sky, like a blessing. It's in you. You program yourself. So he'd programmed himself with genuine compassion, genuine bodhicitta, truly the wish, genuinely, no second thought, and they weren't his children. They were strangers. That's why that woman who went up to these guys. It's so bizarre, this whole thing in London, because there's someone there with their video taking the whole thing, and the guy, with the perp with his big axe, is shouting at the camera, and he's hanging around waiting for the police to come. So the whole thing's so clear to everybody. It's phenomenal. So this woman comes up. She hops out of the bus, I think. There were 2 women. That's right. She came and she said, I saw many other people around, but I wanted to deflect it to make sure if he had a gun, he was going to harm me, not the others. Just like that. And she talked to him, kept his attention. That's phenomenal. You've got to admit. And the thing is, with Harry, you can deduce that he practiced in that life. With someone like that, she's probably not even a practitioner, probably not even spiritual, but we can deduce she had those imprints. The other guy with the hatchet, with the Shetty, that was his imprint. She had these imprints of compassion. Even saying, I didn't want him to kill all these other people, his children and people around. This is incredible. No fear, talking to him, trying to, what are you going to do? You're going to get into trouble. Give me the gun. Very amazing, very courageous. Has to be her imprint. But Harry practiced in this life. So there's the proof of the pudding. And then, so this shows the power of his own practice, of his own bodhicitta. But Geshe-Lama Kongtrul business, that shows the power of the holy being. That shows their capability. But once you've achieved this level of realization, your mind is wherever there is anything, and you can activate the potential beings in the most seemingly magical ways. Father, it's a very amazing story. So, we're at the 4th of the 4. Enthusiasm. We're at bodhicitta, the motivation. That's what we've been discussing. Are we clear about all this? Clear? 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 Oh, sweetheart, what was it? The 4, okay, I'll just... Huh? What, sweetheart? Oh, okay, no, I really didn't say that. I'm so sorry. I'm speaking too fast and all over the place. No. Okay, so what I'm doing, have you heard this stuff before? Yeah, okay, good. So we're looking at the points of the path in order. So then the compassion wing, we begin with equanimity, go through those stages, we get to culminate with this amazing practice called Tonglen, which is from the whole genre of practices called exchanging yourself for others. We read that 8 verses, and this transforming problems, the one of all this, all of this is from these practices that bring bodhicitta. Then once you've got your bodhicitta, you carry on the next set of practices of the 6 perfections, where you perfect these things. So what I'm saying is those first 4 perfections, generosity, morality, patience, and enthusiasm, they're the 4 when you've perfected them. And I began to talk about what the criterion is of having perfected each one of those. And so why this example of giving your body, why this one of example of Harry? Okay, Harry's point was that's an example of the perfection of generosity, which is the first. He was prepared to give his life. That's the criterion. So then the perfection of morality, I don't know honestly what that is. I don't know what the criterion is. Never mind. But you perfected these 4. You could say that's the perfecting of the compassion wing, which is the work you do in relation to sentient beings. Now, of those 4, what I'm saying is, and I skipped all over the place, compassions come way before. Compassion, great compassion, then bodhicitta, and now you're perfecting, even with your bodhicitta, these. You understand? The 4th of these is, they're taught in order of difficulty. First, generosity. More even morality. More even is patience. Most is the perfection of joyful effort, the perfection of enthusiasm, the one of never giving up. That's the most important of those 4. That's what I'm saying. You with me? So we got to those, now we're at that. Now the last 2, and I think we'll probably have a break now. We'll have lunch and have a break.
So motivation is under joyful effort.
No, motivation is the thing that pervades all of the compassion wing. But it comes, we pretend initially. So right now we're not bodhisattvas, but we have to bring the bodhicitta and emptiness into our ordinary actions, right? You with me? Informing our eating, our sleeping, our going to the toilet. If you're going to have good sex, please do it with bodhicitta. Smoke your cigarettes, do it with bodhicitta, please. Don't think, oh, that's a bad action, I shouldn't do it. If you're going to do it with bodhicitta. Don't be ridiculous. So what I'm saying is a method, as well as these practices, we go through them, but in everyday life we inform all our ordinary actions with this motivation, and that's one of the methods for getting bodhicitta. And it turns every action we do into a cause for enlightenment, because bodhicitta is the main cause of enlightenment. You with me? That's right. That's exactly right. Yes. So that's all the way through the bodhisattva. With all of our lives starting now, we keep remembering that. That's training our mind. We'll hear those points. We're going through the stages of development. That's all. Do you understand? Okay. So my feeling is now the last 2 are where we perfect the wisdom wing. Now in the Lam Rim, this is where meditation, calm abiding, the 5th of the 6 perfections, which is the training in concentration, and then the 6th is what they call special insight, which is the insight into the emptiness of the eye. Where these are the last 2, they're taught here. So I think we'll do that after lunch. We'll talk about concentration, meditation, and then go back into emptiness again. And this is when you perfect those 2, plus the perfection of the first 4, that's the 2 wings, the culmination of this is Buddhahood. But before this, you have to snuck into postgraduate, where you start adding to your practice, your little toolkit, the tantric methods, which just simply hasten your achievement of Buddhahood. That's all they do. They hasten. You add them to your practice of bodhicitta and emptiness. So, yes. Okay. Interestingly, in this Lamrim package, the way Lama Tsongkhapa teaches it, he teaches Guru devotion right at the beginning, as to inform all your practice. But you could say, from the point of view of where we're going, we might develop devotion to a Lama from day 1, and that will inform all our practice. But you could say it's taught most extensively in Tantra. You could say that. Are you understanding my point? Okay. So I think we've finished now for the morning, and then we go and have our lunch. Are we all ready? And remember your lunch, remember emptiness, think it's not inherently existent. It does not exist in and of itself as carrots and soup and bread and potatoes and whatever's there. It does not. It cannot. There's nothing there that isn't called, that doesn't come from mind and concept. Hard to see it, but just have a thought of this. Then that also is not the object of attachment or aversion. Is the object of emptiness, and then we dissolve into empty space. We imagine a whole big, great big container of delicious nectar, which is blessed with the energy of all the Buddhas. Om Ahum, Om Ahum, Om Ahum. Now, transcendental empty nectar. And now the most important of which they says to create merit for our mind, to vastly create marvellous imprints in the mind, we offer it. And offering isn't just with your hands. Thoughts, start with your thoughts. Stupendous. So, we think for the Guru. We visualize, imagine, Buddhas, Gurus, Bodhisattvas, holy beings, and all the sentient beings of all the realms, all the form of humans, pervading space. And then we turn them into the most potent object of our merit, of our offering, which is the Guru Buddha. So we turn them all into Chenrezig. Let's do Chenrezig today. Okay? Buddha of compassion. Trillions and trillions. Our Lama manifesting as Chenrezig. Trillions of them. And then we happily offer this vast nectar to all of them, and we see them all blissing out, happy, delighted, so pleased to accept this offering. Just think those thoughts. And the Rinpoche would say, such powerful karmic images in your mind, you couldn't believe it. So I'd be so delighted. Lama Sangye, Lama Che, Dejin Lama Gedon Te, Kungi Depo Lama Che, Lama Nama Che Pa Bul. Okay, I think the discussion's good. 2 o'clock again, 11, a bit earlier today. We'll just do everything a bit earlier today. So why don't we say 11, 12, so 1 discussion, yeah? 1 o'clock discussion, and come back at 2:15. Okay? Come back at 2:15. Unless you want another hour. Let's have lunch and see you, have a discussion at 1, come back at 2:15. Thank you so much, everybody.